Welcome to Product Academy Tough Stuff, the podcast where we cut through the noise and get straight to the toughest challenges in product management. I'm Tanya Lau.
And I'm Francesca Cortesi.
In each episode, we tackle one tough question. No fluff, no filler. Just candid insights from seasoned product leaders.
Our guests deliver actionable, real-world answers. Whether you're an experienced product leader or just stepping into the product world, this is your go-to podcast for sharp, tested advice, condensed for your busy schedule.
One tough challenge, practical insights, short and real.
Let's dive in.
So today's we have a really tough question, and I mean when I think about it, I connect this with one of the most frustrating moments in my product career. And it is about how do you balance long-term and short-term. And I've been there, when I spent a lot of time and energy and I was creating all these perfect plans built on product strategy and everything was fine. And then something happened and we needed to close a deal or something else popped our way and it felt like we had to throw everything into the bin. And I felt the frustration, PMs around me felt the frustration, and it was not a nice day, when this happened. And I believe a lot of people feel this, how do you do it? I mean, there's plan and there's reality, but how do you put them together? And taking the hot seat of actually answering this really tough question is Alex today. And maybe I want to start with the question that is a bit broader. Do you think that this is a problem at all? Have you experienced it?
Yeah, good morning. I totally see this happening for probably every one of us in product. I think it comes mainly by the nature of where we are sitting in an organization as product managers. We're responsible for immediate short-term results, but we're also responsible for kind of making blends and roadmaps of what is happening in the next 6 months, what's going to be important, product strategies, even looking further into the future. And in a lot of cases, we see those things don't really fit together, which I think is rather the bigger problem behind it. It's not the balance itself, but rather how do we manage to have short-term results always fitting to long-term goals. And I thought about the question quite a lot. And to give a bit of context, I talked to quite a lot of product people in the last couple of years because I'm building a product for product managers. And in probably 90% of the conversation, we somehow touched that topic of immediate results, immediate goals. How do you balance those with long-term impact? And it's not only the goals that are long-term, but rather how do we create value and impact over a longer over a longer time frame while still firefighting. And I also felt it myself quite a lot when working for a hypergrowth company because they want to see short-term results. They need to see short-term results, leadership team, because they need to communicate this to VCs. They need to communicate this to their stakeholders as well. So summarizing, the product people, we're always somehow in the middle of making sure we have a long-term plan that creates this lasting impact. But then probably we have from sales, from leadership, from other stakeholders within the company, we have this constant pressure of delivering results every month on a quarterly basis, on a 2-week cycle basis. So yeah, I think I can see this happening quite a lot. And I'm looking forward to talk a bit about more what practical things you could do to kind of get around this and balance your work a bit better in the sense of making stakeholders happy and kind of they see that stuff is moving in the right direction, but also having your own sanity in check where you're not going crazy on, long-term or short-term, they don't fit together. So I think we can talk a bit about what you can do actually.
Yeah, but what I think you're saying, and I mean what I've also experienced myself, is that you feel as a PM, as a product person, stuck in between two different, sometimes conflicting goals, like what you want here and now, and here and now can be anything from next quarter, next 6 months. I mean, that's depend on your company runway probably, or like what we're doing long term. And I've definitely recognized this, and I've done a lot of trial and error myself until I actually found that, and I mean, I want to hear your opinion if you see something similar, but I actually find a little bit of a mental model for myself on how to balance those two things. Because I think that if you are pre-market fit, or sometimes even if you are pre-profitability, probably you need to be more leaning towards the short term. And the pre-market fit is almost short term and don't get too attached to the long term, because that can change. I mean, your product doesn't have the fit yet, so you're not even sure if there's a market, if there's a problem to solve. But if you have market fit, but you're profitable, there it's more like, oh, you need the money in the bank. I mean, you're like, you know, this sailing ship. And I mean, if the money, like your wind is not there, I mean, you're not going to get to destination anyway. So keep sure that you change direction so the wind is with you, but don't do anything to jeopardize your vision. So it's more like short-term and vision. While if you're more in a stable environment where you have like the possibility of maybe thinking 1 year, 3 year, there is where like, and I think this is like the a little bit what you were describing, right? I mean, how do I think the next quarter and the next 3 year? This is like extremely different and difficult mindsets. And I have not seen, to be honest, just to be a bit provocative, that it works to have both of those on the same person. So like balancing is more like having those goals extremely clear. So that would be one thing. But the other thing is like, is it humanly possible to put this in the same person? What's your experience?
Yeah, no, I fully agree. It definitely changes based on what organization you work for. And that's probably also the biggest part where I had to unlearn quite a lot, coming from working for rather two bigger corporations with around 2,000 people, and then starting my own thing where we were like 10. So I saw both sides, and I failed totally in one of them, where I created a product strategy with long-term goals for, like you said, for a startup, where the short-term wins, they didn't really benefit from having this product strategy longer term. So I'm not 100% sure if one person can't actually do that. Probably in a startup, the long-term stuff should come at least from leadership or like a CEO kind of figure. And if you're like 10 people, you probably have one product person responsible, who is then also kind of juggling between the long-term vision and short-term wins on how to get there. I think if you're like a bigger company, that kind of work is definitely distributed between a lot of different people, which makes sense. And it's probably also where the problem arises quite a lot, where every product manager thinks they need to come up with their own little long-term vision and strategy, and kind of how do we evolve my feature or my part of the product into something way bigger. I'm more on the side where it's like, okay, you rather work together as a group of people and develop one cohesive vision or like long-term strategy together. I think it should never happen in isolation anyway, but that's what I saw quite a lot happening in the industry, that you have a VP product or a CPO that she runs off and creates a vision for the product, and then all the product people have to kind of accommodate to that vision, rather than the whole team together builds a cohesive story where the short-term wins that probably mostly the ICs are experiencing, they fit perfectly into that long-term vision. But the balance then is already hopefully more established than if you would do those two things in isolation, I would say. So yes, I agree. Like the more people you get, probably the more shoulders should be involved in kind of balancing these two things with each other. in both cases, I think there's a couple of things that you could do to prevent doing too much short-term or too much long-term. I saw cases where there was like a great long-term vision, great long-term goals being defined, but no idea of how to actually get there. So we can talk a bit about solving that problem, but also if you are going too much on the short-term side and you have no real idea on how all of what you're currently doing fits into a bigger picture, it's also bad. So there is a very natural tendency that you have to come up with a balanced approach if you want to be successful, and that looks different from company to company. And probably the more startup kind of companies, they're in survival mode, so they need to have a clear idea where they want to go, but they don't need to be as specific as kind of a Microsoft or like a huge corporation who will definitely be here in 10 years. So they need to be more on the long-term side. But yeah, we can go into that a bit more into detail as well.
I think what's interesting when you're talking is like what I take with me is that there are a bit of maybe two preconception that we product people come to the table with. One is that we are required to have a long term, like, you know, you talked about this VP that comes in, probably he or she thinks that it's her job to have like this, you know, when you take that step from individual contributor where you're actually talking about impact, you see the impact of the things you build. When you take that extra step and you don't have like direct impact on building, then what is your job, right? So, I mean, it becomes like this, is it true? Like, you know, question mark. Is it true that your job is like, you know, the further you go up in the ladder, the more strategic you get? Like that, what is this thing? And the other thing, like maybe preconception, is that there needs to be a balance between long-term and short-term. Does it need to be a balance? Or maybe depending on the company stage, the company type, the company growth curve, the company leadership, the company investors, etc., maybe you have to accept that you're not in for a balance, you're in for the one or the other. And I mean, you touched on both of this, and it's about like, you know, balancing. I mean, that's how do I that's even the question, how do I balance short and long term? For question is like, do you even have to balance? Right? I mean, do you think that the balance is something that we should strive for, or rather we should understand the situation and think, okay, where are we tipping the most?
It's a good point, and I never thought about it this way, but it is probably a balance that is required on kind of an organizational level. And if you're a startup, the organizational level is one person working in product together with a CEO maybe. If you're like a bigger company, that organizational level are maybe hundreds of people. So the bigger you get, the harder it probably gets to kind of align everyone. And to the first question you had, where it's like, the higher you go up in the ladder, what is your job? In my opinion, it's really about making sure that this balance is lived within the product organization, and even beyond the product organization. If you have design, if you have research, if you have product ops, if you work together with engineers, with other stakeholders like sales and stuff, like they need to understand how they can actually contribute to those long-term goals. And the higher you go up, the more it is your job to visualize that balance and to visualize kind of in which direction you're going. And it is probably the balance within the organization that is required, because as you said, like there will be people who work more like on a monthly basis or a 2-week cycle, and probably the higher you go up, the more you work on a half a year. How does the company should look like in 2 years? And what I often don't see is the exchange of those two things working in a good way together, because interviewing so many product people from both sides, for product leadership, it is always clear on why the company is doing things. But a lot of ICs, for them, it's like, yeah, we're getting dictated features, or we're getting dictated the direction from leadership. So even if that might be a good direction, or those features are aligned with what users want, in those cases, there might be this communication missing on the balance itself. Like they looked into the future, they did the research, they are just probably not good in visualizing or communicating that direction. And then you have that tension that you can feel for like 10, 15 years in product management, that it's always leadership dictates us, we're not empowered. And like probably that empowerment also comes from being able to see that balance and sharing and working together. And I remember, and it's a good example, what if I would be CPO of a company, I would do this in every company. The first thing I would do is at XING, where I started my career, we had a session on Tuesday morning, which was still everyone in the office. But one of the VPs of product, he bought this German little pastry called Franzbrötchen, which is super famous in Hamburg. And there was one calendar invite for everyone in product. Product managers, they came together. We were like 60 or 70 different product people, but we all knew there is Franzbrötchen on Tuesday morning at 9:30 in one of the big rooms. And there was a presentation or there was no presentation, but it was always clear you had to go there because you can talk with all the other people there. Nobody was busy because there was the time for product people. And probably the balance and the talking and the planning and the kind of just sharing with others what's actually happening in a sometimes formal, sometimes informal way helped a lot to kind of create that balance. And looking back, that was probably the best meeting we had, because you brought everyone together and you had everyone on the same level instantly, like creating that balance of, okay, what is actually happening long term? Leadership was sharing something, and what is currently happening? What are the wins? What did we do? What did we ship? Kind of stuff. When you talk to others, what's happening short term? You had that in one session, 30 minutes on a Tuesday morning. So thinking back, that kind of got me a bit nostalgic. So I think these kind of things should happen more from leadership, in my opinion.
So what I'm hearing you say is that, and you correct me if I'm like misinterpreting you, but one of the key of the balance between long-term and short-term is understanding how the different pieces of the puzzle go together. So if you're on a bigger company, if you're operating, obviously, like if you are 3 people, that's the easier part, right? I mean, you're probably already talking with each other, but the mess starts when you start scaling up and you are 70, 80, 90 product people, or even thousands. So there is like the biggest tension is felt because there is not really bridging the gap between the strategy and what's actually happening here and now. And one way of solving is creating this forum or these ways of talking together.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that was for us, and looking backwards, that actually created that balance in my head where I kind of understood as an IC what is actually happening and why are we doing things. Just by having this cadence of every week, you talk to others that are in the same situation as you are and above, and kind of you share results and stuff. So that's one way. In the beginning, we said we can share a couple of practical tips I also gathered from a lot of interviews with product people over the years. That could be applied to everyone. If you're like 2 people in a company, or if you're 1,000 working in product, I think it all comes down to first principle thinking. Like, is the thing that is probably coming in short term and that we need to solve, or like the work that we have on our plate, is this actually, like, what are we trying to solve? Why is this important? Often we don't ask that question enough. Like, we just take a list from somewhere, or we just get a sales telling us, okay, is this actually, like, we would close more deals if we have this feature, this kind of stuff. So going back and making the time to ask the question why and how this would actually fit into what we're currently doing and what the result would be, oftentimes already helps in kind of solving that problem of, is this actually important right now? I have in most cases, you can't go back. Like if you have developed something, there's this one door, two door analogy from Jeff Bezos, but in most cases it is never a two door, because like try to get something back from users, or like it is never as easy as just turning it off. Like the bigger the company, it's harder to get it off anyway, because you have a couple of people using it. And so be very clear on why you're doing something before you actually start doing it. And then, like another tip I got from quite a lot of people is that they force this kind of balance. So they think of their opportunities or the solutions they're building as kind of a portfolio of, I think Shreyas Doshi has the analogy of core versus explore, which I like quite a lot, where you label different types of work with what there actually should be about. Like you have 70% on core and you do 30% on exploration kind of stuff, or long-term things. So be very explicit about where you want to spend your time on, because that can help. Like if you say, okay, we plan a sprint, or we do the work in this quarter. If you use OKR, like we have one OKR for core stuff and we have one OKR for explore stuff. So you kind of force yourself to think in both ways. And then the third part, for me, probably also the most important one, where all of it comes together, is visualizing it. I don't think it's enough to put it in a document in a written form, because most people, they don't read and try to make an effort to kind of understand context in which their work can be most impactful. So it's really about visualizing and evangelizing why we're doing certain things in the future, and how the stepstones to get there are important, and like what are the incremental things to get there. And what I do myself quite a lot, and what I saw other people being successful with, is kind of putting that in a decision tree, or in a tree kind of format, because it's rather easy. You put the long-term goal in a sticky on the top, and then you branch out into different things that could happen, like the opportunity solution trees or impact trees. Like, what are the things today? What are the small increments that we can work on? You can use different colors, even if you want to show, okay, these are the 5 things that we're doing, and they kind of go up all the way to this specific long-term goal. I'm not saying you have to get to that goal at one point, but it rather gives the whole context of your current work, and it gives you the possibility to be as incremental as you want, and then also celebrate those little wins. But you always have the connection to something bigger. You always have the connection to something more impactful. So it's those 3 things, like asking why we're doing things a bit more than we're used to. Sometimes asking why a couple of times more actually helps. The second, force it, like really be explicit about what kind of work you're currently looking at, or what you want to spend time on, and how much. And then the third one is really visualizing upwards and downwards, like have one tree together with the whole team, leadership as well as ICs, and then you kind of create something together, and you create this shared balance that we were talking about earlier.
I think like what you have there, especially, I mean, visualizing, but I also think I would add talking a lot about it, like in every decision, like in the team and outside the team, if you have that Tuesday meeting that you were describing. I mean, going back to why are we doing things, because this is the direction we're taking, and bridging the gap between the long term, or like that's where we're heading and what we're doing now. It's especially like important. I would also add to that if you're in a situation when you don't have those things laid off for you, it could also be a good exercise to understand there is a gap there. And this could also help you in another situation that sometimes is the hardest one. So when you have like someone coming at you with something they want to do, and that is actually not aligned with that top of the three goal. So that is like, shall we or shall we not diverge to where we're going? And I mean, I think here it's really important not directly go no. Because that is like when those things happen, it's easy that we use the strategy as the shield. And in some cases, depending on, again, like which kind of company you're operating in, it could be not a good thing to do. Instead, like having this visualization force, again, a discussion. And again, I wanna maybe wrap up saying that this is extremely difficult. I mean, the bigger you go, the more people you have, the more discussion you need, the more difficult it is to understand how your thing that you're working on connects with the strategy. It's a mess, but I think it's like it's the mess that you have to thrive in, and also understanding that not all the time it's a balance, but what you have to strive for is to make really conscious decisions that are aligned with the one around you that should be involved in those decisions.
Yeah, no, totally. And there was the evangelizing part where as a product person, you need to be a good communicator. You need to be able to sell all the time and to bring people together, and that visualization helps. And having like those guardrails on, like we label it in a specific way what type of work we're using. But yeah, you're totally right. Like, talking is probably the most fundamental thing that kind of helps you to create this balance. And I think it's a good end to that conversation, that you, as a product person, it comes all down to kind of selling, communicating, and being able to communicate with others in the organization.
Yeah, and maybe like exactly to wrap up this, I would say that you have maybe one silver bullet to this, which is taking the hard conversations. Like, and those could be like conversation about you don't feel that you know how to bridge the strategy with the tactics, or that you're going against the long-term strategy, or anything else. But if it's only a frustration with you and you don't air it out, it's not going to help you. So yeah, communication, that also means taking those hard decisions, and we're all been there. It's excruciating, but they work.
Yes. That's the nice thing about product management, right?
Exactly. It's about people. Thank you so much, Alex, for sharing your wisdom with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Product Academy Tough Stuff.
We hope today's tough question gave you practical, actionable insights.
If you enjoyed the episode, do us a favor and leave a rating or review. It will help us grow the podcast and make future episodes even better.
Got a question for us? Send an email to toughstuff@productacademy.ch and ask away. We read any submission and might answer yours in a later episode.
Thank you again for listening. We'll see you next time with another tough challenge to tackle.
Until then, take care.